On a rain-polished Boston evening, I learned the heart can change its mind in one quiet breath. I'm a physician, steady with my hands and careful with my promises. Jake, my oldest friend, was the straight arrow who rebuilt porches and fixed leaky roofs. I never expected the way his hand would find mine outside a hospital at 2 a.m., or the words he'd whisper that would rewrite every rule I thought I knew. This is a story about friendship, courage, and the gentle medicine of being seen, told softly for anyone who needs a calm place to breathe. Tonight, here. If tender, true stories help you feel less alone, please tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who could use a steady voice. Comment with your own unexpected friendship moment. New chapters arrive weekly. Join our circle and turn on notifications so you'll never miss gentle company. Thank you. Boston wears October like a cardigan, cozy, a little threadbare, and good at holding memories. The sidewalks around Beacon Hill glow under street lamps, maple leaves skittering like soft applause. That night I was walking home from a late shift at the clinic, stethoscope still in my bag, mind moving through the day's patients, the gentleman with high blood pressure who promised to start walking by the Charles, the single mom counting. Pills like they were coins, the young man whose panic attacks sounded like thunder. My own pulse was steady, the practiced calm of a doctor who knows where to place his hands. I've always liked the predictability of medicine, the way a good listen can lead the way routine can be kindness. Don't get me wrong, life still surprises you. But the staccato beats of emergency rooms feel less scary when you've counted them 1,000 times. What I hadn't counted on was seeing Jake's truck idling under the streetlight across from my building. The same battered Ford I'd recognize. By the dent above the rear tire from a summer we were 19 and careless with a borrowed canoe, the back held a coiled orange extension cord, a stack of cedar planks, and a bright yellow level. The tailgate had a sticker that read, "Measure twice, cut once." I stopped. For a breath, the timeline folded. I was back on our high school. Baseball field in Worcester, grass wet on my cleats, the afternoon sun riding low, Jake laughing as he pointed to the nosebleed bleachers where he'd once climbed up to drop a water balloon on his own head just to make me smile. Back then, I didn't know what to call the ache I felt when he slung an arm over my shoulder, or the way my stomach flipped when he laughed at something I'd said. I knew he was straight. Everyone did. He flirted with girls at the ice cream stand and kissed one of them behind the library in a scandal that smelled like cherries and dust. I knew my part. Be his friend. Be grateful. Be quiet. Sam? His voice pulled me fully back into my 30s, into my white coat days. He stepped out from the truck, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, head tilted slightly like he was afraid. I might dissolve into the fog if he moved too fast. His hair was a little shorter, flecked with early gray that he wore like a badge. His shoulders were broader, the kind you don't get from gym mirrors but from lifting real things. Lumber, a kid, a grief. He looked good, familiar, and startling. Jake Donovan. I couldn't help it. I smiled. The kind that makes the muscles around your eyes fold like paper origami. The kind you give to someone who once built a treehouse with you out of nothing but stubbornness and nails. He walked those last few steps, and for a moment we just stood, breathing the same October air, counting the ways we'd changed and the ways we hadn't. "I heard you were back," he said. "From my mom. She runs into your mother at the Stop and Shop, and now I know every update, whether I want it or not. And, do you?" My voice was gentle, part habit, part hope. He shrugged, then grinned in that easy way that once made teachers forgive late homework. "Depends. I didn't enjoy hearing you returned because your dad's hips went on strike." "Total hip replacements," I said, a smile in my tone. "He calls them his titanium upgrades. The airport loves him." Jake laughed. It felt like coming home to a room I hadn't known I missed. He glanced past me at my building, the brownstone with the stoop that leaned a little, trusting more than it should. I was nearby, he said, nodding toward his truck. Working on a downtown renovation. Figured I'd see if you needed anything. Your porch looks like it's got opinions. I looked at the steps with their hairline cracks and sighed. It does. Mostly that it's tired of holding me up. I can fix tired, he said simply. If you want. He said it like bringing over a casserole, a small kindness that meant more than it sounded. That's always been Jake's way. He doesn't promise grand gestures. He shows up with a level, a thermos of coffee, and time. I hadn't expected to need that, to want it, but I did. Maybe I always had. In medicine, we talk about the power of small interventions. A half hour of walking most days can lower blood pressure. A friend who texts to ask if you ate today can catch depression in its early quiet. With houses, Jake said, it's not so different. Fix a step, and you'll use the whole staircase more. Seal a draft, and a room remembers it's meant for sitting in. He came on Saturdays, the truck gravelly as it pulled up. He'd knock, even though I told him the door was open. He always knocked. It occurred to me that not everyone breaks down your defenses like a battering ram. Some people ask your permission to come closer. He brought tools. I made coffee. The old floorboards creaked offendedly and then quieted as if they too were listening. We worked side by side. Or rather, he worked. I handed him things and tried not to put my thumb where the hammer wanted to argue. I had steady hands for stitching. Measuring a miter cut was another kind of precision. I learned to love the crisp sound of wood dressed. True, the sandpaper's hum, the whisper of a saw blade doing exactly what it was built for. The house started to learn us. Or maybe we learned it. We talked in the way men do when their hands are busy, when there's eye contact only sometimes, and long pauses that mean nothing is broken. He told me about his work. Renovating the kind of triple-deckers that line Dorchester like linen folded 3 times. About his crew who called him boss with more affection than fear. He mentioned a woman he'd dated for a while, Maggie, who moved to Denver because she liked the altitude and not the conversations about the future. He didn't say it hurt, but the way his voice went quieter around her name did it for him. I told him about residency nights that tasted like vending machine coffee and fluorescent lights. About the patient who brought me a crocheted zucchini, as a thank you, because you said my sugar was high and I needed to think green. About my mother, who had decided to become a potter at 61, and my father who insisted on dancing in the kitchen when she threw clay, just to make her laugh. I didn't tell him the rest of it, not yet. The long relationships that had ended, not because of some loud betrayal, but because my schedule had too many Sundays spent at the hospital, because my walls looked like responsibility and a certain kind of fear. My last boyfriend, Chris, left a note on the table. You are kind. You are also far away. It was easier to be a doctor than it was to be a man whose heart could be bruised. Jake, of course, did not ask. He had always known not to poke the sore spot unless invited. He showed up with a bag of bagels instead, and we found a rhythm that didn't hurt. One Saturday, he arrived with a stack of cedar boards that made the whole room smell like a forest after rain. Porch day, he announced like a holiday. Doctors, orders, I replied, and he laughed at the shared pretend authority of our trades. We stripped the old boards, careful of the nails that wanted to remember when they were needed. He measured twice, cut once. The sun moved like a slow metronome across the street. A neighbor I knew by sight but not by name waved. A kid rode by on a scooter with the concentration of a surgeon. It's funny, Jake said at one point, wiping his forehead with the back of his wrist. I used to think of you as the strong one. I thought that was your line, I said. He had always been the one who lifted heavy things, the one who stood up when the teacher asked who would carry the folding chairs. He shrugged. You just stayed put, even when other people wanted to blow away. You were the person I could tell the truth to and still go to school the next day. The nail I was holding sat suddenly heavy in my hand. That he remembered me like that made something settle inside me, a bird choosing the right branch at last. "You too," I said. It was true. He had a way of letting me be strange and quiet and bookish without trying to tease me into some other shape. He let people be themselves and made it seem like the easiest thing. We worked until the light thinned and the porch looked new without pretending it hadn't once been old. He ran his palm over the wood like a blessing. "Good bones," he said. "You chose well." "You helped," I replied, then caught myself. "Help." He looked up, held my gaze a fraction longer than the sentence required. "Yeah," he said. Then he packed his tools, knocked his knuckles lightly against the doorframe, and left me with a porch and a heart that felt freshly sanded. A week later, the clinic hosted a free Saturday health fair in the church hall in Jamaica Plain. Blood pressure checks, flu shots, nutrition advice, and a line of folding tables that kept being too short for the lives placed across them. I asked Jake to help with setup, and he said yes before I explained. He showed up early with his crew to carry tables and affix signs. Bienvenidos, free screenings, questions welcome. The morning smelled like coffee, Lysol, and hope. People came, grandparents who wanted to keep walking their grandkids to school, a teenager who pretended the sugar on his donut didn't have anything to say to his blood, a woman whose eyes filled when we told her the pain in her hands didn't mean she couldn't keep sewing. It just meant she needed to change how. Jake moved through the room with the competence and warmth he brings to job sites. He adjusted a sign so the Spanish and English were side by side, not stacked. He knelt to tape a cord out of the way where an older man might trip. He brought water bottles to volunteers without being asked. People smiled when they saw him. He has that face, the kind you hand things to, the kind you trust. At noon, when the rush thinned, a woman in her 70s named Mrs. Alvarez sat across from me, hands folded like a notebook she'd read a long time. "You look tired, mijo," she said kindly, and I laughed because yes, I did. She turned her hands over in mine. The knuckles were enlarged, the skin thin as memory. "Arthritis," I said, gentle. I showed her exercises, simple ones. With a rubber band, we talked about warm water and patience. She told me about her late husband, who had loved Red Sox baseball and burned the rice exactly 3 times in 52 years. Jake drifted by to deliver a tray of sandwiches. He paused, then smiled like a sunrise. "Those are hands that have held a lot," he said to Mrs. Alvarez, and she patted his cheek like he was the grandson she wished lived closer. "Tell him," she told me, nodding toward Jake as he moved away. "Tell him to be careful with hearts like yours." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Do I look fragile?" I joked. She shook her head. "No, but you look like the kind who holds other people together. Someone should hold you too. Even doctors need hands that understand." The piano in my head changed keys. It wasn't that I expected anything from Jake. It was that I had spent years not expecting things, as if expectation itself were a luxury I could not afford. Hope, I had learned, is also a form of medicine. Dosage matters. I watched him cross the room, laughing with a child who had sticky fingers, tying a balloon for a teenager who pretended not to care. He was good with people in the unshowy way I trusted. He made the room feel safe. That night, after we packed up and reset the folding chairs in patient rows, he waited as I closed the supply closet. "Dinner?" he asked. "My treat. There's a place on Center Street that makes a respectable burger." "I could do a burger," I said, my stomach already signing the consent form. We walked through the chill to the restaurant, shoulders nearly brushing. Inside, the lighting was warm, the kind that made everyone look softer. He ordered a burger with a fried egg. I ordered the veggie one because I wasn't ready to explain to my heart why I couldn't also have a fried egg. Over. Fries, we talked about nothing and then about everything, the way it happens when the right person sits across from you. He told me a story about his dad teaching him to parallel park with a 3-hat trick. If your tire touches the front hat, you owe me $2. I told him about my first day on the cardiology rotation, how the sound of a murmur reminded me that the heart is an honest organ. It tells the truth about itself if you know how to listen. When the check came, he paid. When we left, he held the door for me, and I made myself let him, even though I always want to be the one who does the holding. Outside, the air had that bright cold that smells like the first snow. A group of guys, early 20s and loud with the particular courage of beer, stumbled out of a bar down the block. One of them nudged the other, pointed at us, and said something I couldn't hear but understood from the way it made his friends laugh. Jake's shoulders shifted. It wasn't big, just a minor adjustment in his stance. I could feel the old instinct in me, the one that says keep walking, keep your chin up, pretend you don't notice, save your safety for later. But before I could do anything, Jake turned to me and said, at a normal volume, "You know, Sam, some people's opinions are like a crooked shelf. If you put anything on them, it just falls." I laughed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a joke and a statement and a shield all at once. The guys lost interest. We kept moving. My heartbeat slowed without me telling. It too? "I appreciate you," I said quietly. He nodded, looked almost embarrassed, like kindness was a habit he didn't want applause for. "You've always had my back," he said. Seemed fair. But fairness wasn't what I felt under that streetlight. It was something else. A wave that startled me with its warmth, its rightness. The simplest truth. It felt good to walk beside him. It felt even better to be seen beside him. Life rarely picks a dramatic soundtrack for our turning points. Sometimes it's a Tuesday with leftover pasta and a pile of charts waiting to be signed. Sometimes it's the sound of rain that decides whether to be drizzle or commitment. It was a Thursday. Rain ticked against the windows like a second hand. I was at the clinic, last patient finally checked out, my shoulders practicing their impression of a coat rack. I'd just signed the last prescription when my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "You still at work?" "Yes," I typed back, then added, "About to leave." "Wait for me," came the reply. "Got something." He lived over in Southie, a short drive away if the roads were cooperative. I locked up, pocketed my keys, and stood under the awning as the rain hardened. 10 minutes later, his truck pulled up. He jumped out and ran to the curb, jacket zipped for once. "Come on," he said, the excitement of someone who has found a solution to a problem you didn't know you had. He handed me a to-go cup of hot chocolate with whipped cream and a lid that tried its best. "From that place on the corner. The one your nurse Patty says is better than therapy." "It is," I said, breathing in the sweetness. He steered me toward the passenger side of his truck. "Get in. I want to show you something." I'm not by nature impulsive. My work trains me to ask questions before moving, but Jake is one of the few people who can convince me to skip the intake and go straight to triage. I climbed in. We drove in companionable silence through the wet. The wipers clicked like patient claps. The city blurred and then sharpened again. He took a turn I didn't expect, another through streets that are used to people having somewhere they need to be. We crossed the bridge toward Charlestown, wound through, and then, there it was, the Navy Yard, the old warship sitting solid, the water black as promise, the skyline making its usual earnest argument. He parked near the pier, killed the engine, and we sat with the rain making music. "My dad used to bring me here," he said, "when my mom worked nights at the hospital. We'd sit and he'd tell me about every ship like it was a friend. He would say, 'Any boat can float on a sunny day. The ones worth trusting know what to do in a storm.'" I turned to look at him. He had that faraway softness, someone, watching a home movie only he can see. "He's a good man," I said. "I've known Mr. Donovan most of my life. A natural storyteller. The kind who makes everything sound like a lesson you asked for." "He is," Jake said. He cleared his throat. He, had a scare last week. Didn't tell anyone but me. Chest pain. It passed. He doesn't want to worry. My mom. He looked down at his hands, opened and closed them. I told him to see his doctor. He said he would. His laugh held a familiar helplessness. I keep replaying it. What if, you know. I nodded, the doctor in me moving forward, with quiet shoes. I can call him, I offered. Gently. Say I was thinking of him. Invite him in for tea and blood work. Jake's smile was grateful. Maybe. He listens to you. We sat with that for a while, the rain easing enough to reveal the shy stars. Then I felt it. That shift. Not dramatic. Like a boat turning just slightly to face the wind. Sam, he said, and my name felt different in his mouth. Can I ask you something? He kept his eyes on the water. This was a question for a horizon. Always, I said, and meant it. He was quiet again, then. Have you ever thought of me as more than your friend? The world tilted. Not a violent spin, a careful reorientation, as if someone had decided the map had been upside down for a while, and now it was going to tell the truth. My first instinct was to fill the air with sound. Old habit. Protect him, protect me, protect the moment from itself. But I've spent enough time with people and their most tender admissions to know, let silence be the room where the words can walk around. I took a breath, the kind I teach anxious teenagers to take. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Yes, I said softly. There was no nobility in lying, not to him, not to me. I have. He nodded, still watching the water. His hands were on the steering wheel, thumbs resting like they might learn to pray. I thought so, he said. He looked over at me then. Really looked, the kind of look that asks, can I come in? I must have nodded because something eased in his shoulders. I'm not... He started, then stopped, then tried again. I've always been... I don't know. I liked girls. I still do. But then... You. You're like... that house I've been renovating? The one where the bones are so good and the... strange corners make sense when you stay long enough. I realize that's not a romantic metaphor. Sorry. I laughed. It was the sweetest apology I'd ever heard. It's perfect, I said. He swallowed. I'm trying to say... I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to wake up and think about whether you slept enough. I didn't expect to buy hot chocolate because you might be cold. I didn't expect to want to call you when the day is good, not just when it's bad. I didn't expect my chest to do that weird, tight thing when you smile at someone else. And I didn't expect that I might want to... He stopped. The rain, respectful, softened further. There's a moment in surgery when the room goes quiet because everyone can see the crucial thing. This was like that. Can I hold your hand? He asked. It felt oddly like informed consent, the very best kind. He wasn't assuming. He wasn't taking. He was asking if he could place his hand in mine and see if it fit. Yes, I said, and offered it, palm up. He took it. His hand was warm, familiar, the callus along his fingers whispering his story. When our palms met, it didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like a porch light turning on. Home. We sat there, hand in hand, the city doing its city business, the water quietly applauding. No kiss. Not then. Just the kindness of touch, the way a hand can say, I'm here. In that moment, it was enough. More than. I never expected this from my straight friend, I said, then winced at my choice of words. He squeezed my hand, smiling. Me neither, he said. Turns out, labels are sometimes just the first draft. We stayed until the rain stopped. He drove me home. I wanted him to stay. I wanted to rush and leap, but the kindest medicine is often slow. "Good night," he said at my door. "Sleep." "You too," I whispered, and watched him walk back to his truck, the night making shelter around him. Mornings can be cruel after nights like that. The brain loves to have opinions once the sun hits the kitchen tiles. Mine brewed coffee and thought too much. What did last night mean? Was this a moment or a movement? Was I safe to hope? In the clinic, I listened to lungs and hearts, the familiar rhythm helping me remember that the best way to handle an uncertain path is to keep walking, step by step, gaze soft, somewhere between a prescription for a statin and advice about plantar. Fasciitis, my phone buzzed. A text. "Coffee at noon? Can swing by." I sent back a single word. Yes. He arrived on time, which is his way of saying, I meant it. We sat at my kitchen table, brown mugs warming our hands, the house the only other witness. "I want to be honest," he said. "I don't know all my answers yet, but I know this. I respect you, I care about you, and I don't want to hurt you." I nodded. "That's my fear," I said, not ashamed to admit it. "That you'll figure out this was an episode, and I'll be the one who writes the diagnosis on the chart and then has to live with it." He winced, and for a second, the old protective instinct in me wanted to take it back, to protect him from my honesty. But this was not a patient I needed to cushion. This was a person I might love. Truth mattered. "I don't want that either," he said. "What if we go slow? No big words, no pressure. Let's be curious about what this is, and if it's nothing, if I realize I'm not the man you deserve, then we'll be honest, and I'll still fix your porch." A laugh caught me off guard. It felt like rain in July. "You don't have to promise me carpentry," he shrugged, smiled. "It's my love language. I don't usually speak in languages like that. But I can sweep a floor. I can cook a roast chicken that doesn't dry out. I can set out a second mug and mean it." "Okay," I said. Slow, honest. We made a plan. Which is to say, we agreed to not make too much of a plan. We would see each other. We would talk. We would not hide. We would not kiss other people absent-mindedly to see if it helped. We would be kind. And then we did something that felt like the most adult thing I'd done in months. We called a therapist. Not because we were broken, but because sometimes it helps to have a map maker along when you're hiking a new trail. Her name was Dr. Rains, and she had a voice like an old record, warm, a little scratchy, one you trust. She said what I needed most to hear. It's okay for this to be confusing and also beautiful. She told Jake, attraction and identity are not always the same thing. You get to be honest about both. She told me, your job isn't to hold his confusion still. Your job is to hold yourself steady. We went once a week for a month. We learned to translate for each other. He taught me not to read his silences like they were rejection. They were pauses, not verdicts. I taught him that my neat kitchen wasn't about control. It was about offering both of us a place where things made sense. We didn't tell many people. Not because we were ashamed, because we hadn't decided where to put the picture frame. I told my mother, who listened, then said, I always liked Jake. As long as he treats you well, my heart is calm. Jake told his sister, Casey, who shrugged an affectionate shrug and said, Cool. Family dinner Sunday? You're in charge of dessert. Make it chocolate. Even so, there were hard days. There was the afternoon he pulled away when I reached for his hand at a farmer's market because he saw a guy from high school who once nicknamed me in a way that made me smaller. There was the evening I forgot to call because a patient needed me for 3 hours past closing, and when I finally texted, one word, sorry, did not hold all that I meant. We had a conversation about repair. He told me, I need reassurance. I told him, I need consistency. We made notes. We practiced. And there were moments so tender, I had to look away from the brightness of them. The time he stopped by the clinic with a bag of soup because I'd offhandedly said I'd misplaced lunch. The way he stood at the back of the room when I gave a talk on heart health and looked at me like I was inventing something new. The afternoon we took a walk along the esplanade, and he said, "I don't know if I'm straight or bi or what, but I know you feel like the truest thing in my week." We kissed once, on my stoop, on a day the weather had finally learned how to be spring. He tasted like coffee and something shy. It wasn't the first kiss of my life, but it was the first one that felt like both of us walking the same direction. After he put his forehead to mine and exhaled like he'd been holding a plank for too long. "Okay," he whispered, smiling. "Okay." Things don't move in perfect lines. Even with the best intentions, life has rip currents. The one that pulled at us arrived by text. "ER," it said. "Bike accident. Dad." He sent it, and I was already moving, grabbing my keys, my coat, that part of me switching to the mode it knows best. Help now. Feel later. I met him at the hospital, the one where we were born, the one where I'd done my rotation, the one that smelled like antiseptic and resolve. His eyes found mine across the waiting room. He wasn't a carpenter then. He wasn't a man with easy jokes. He was a son whose father was behind a set of double doors. He was human in that way that makes all of us the same species. I sat with him. The television in the corner murmured about weather. A woman nearby cried on a phone. A nurse in blue spoke softly into a headset. Time did that strange thing where it both stopped and sprinted. He tried to be brave. He always does. But bravery and pretending are not the same thing. His knee bounced. His hands twisted in a rhythm that had no beat. "He called me from the ambulance," he said, like he needed me to know they had spoken. They had said, "I love you," in code and then in real words. He sounded scared. I've never heard him sound scared. I nodded. "It's okay to be terrified," I said. "It just means you love him a lot." His laugh was wet. "That's a lousy side effect." "Well worth the risk," I said gently. Doctor came out, one I knew by sight. He had good eyes. "Your father," he started, and Jake stood, body ready to break in either direction. "He's banged up. Broken collarbone, some deep bruises, a concussion, but he's going to be okay. This is the part people don't show in movies because relief isn't cinematic. It is a collapse. It is sitting down when your legs forgot there was a chair. It is tears that have been waiting on the edge of the cliff deciding to jump and discovering there's a warm river below." Jake cried. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to swallow it like a bad pill. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes and let the water come. I put my hand on his back, steady, not as doctor, not as friend, but as the man who had promised to be right there for this. He leaned. It was the lightest and the heaviest thing I've ever held. They let us see. His father. He looked small and big at once, bed sheets doing their best to help. He joked immediately. "Should have used my helmet." And Jake's shoulders dropped an inch. We learned about scans and timelines and how to check pupils with a cell phone. Flashlight. I listened with my doctor brain and also counted Jake's breaths with my heart brain, both of them doing their jobs. When we stepped back into the corridor, the clock felt tired. The hospital exhaled. It was 1:47 a.m. Jake turned to me, eyes red and earnest. He started, and then didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he reached for my hand like he had on that rainy night and held it not like a question but like an answer. We sat on a bench under the exit sign, that green runner toward day. Our shoulders leaned together. We didn't need words. You don't sometimes. You just need the bench to hold. At some point, my head tipped and hit his shoulder. At some point, his cheek brushed my hair. At some point, we both fell asleep there, a nod of care under the neon hum. A nurse named Patty, my Patty, found us and pretended she didn't see. She put a blanket over our knees. I'm just keeping you from catching cold, she said. No other commentary, the kind of nurse who knows how to do triage on feelings. At 2:06 a.m., he whispered the words that would make the title of this story true. He said, voice threadbare and sure, "Sam, I'm in love with you." Quiet, like telling a secret that had been waiting at the edge of the bed for weeks. I didn't rush to answer. I didn't because I wanted to meet the moment with the dignity it had earned. I turned my hand in his and threaded our fingers together. "Me too," I said. It was the simplest diagnosis I'd ever made. I wish I could tell you that after that, we walked into a soft focus montage of brunch and laughter and perfect communication. Life isn't a commercial, but it is, when we're lucky, a series of compassionate acts attached to names we know. His father healed in stages. Concussions take their time. Bones knit like knitters who demand good light. Jake stayed with his parents for a week, sleeping on the couch, waking to the sound of his dad insisting he didn't need to be fussed over, and his mom fussing anyway with the supreme authority of love. I came by after clinic with casseroles, because apparently at 40, you become the person who owns a casserole dish and means it. We learned how to say "I love you" like we were testing a bridge. First about small things, "I love you for remembering my allergy to latex." A week later, a little bigger, "I love you for making space in your day for me." The first time either of us said it inside a goodbye, it lodged in my chest like a warm stone. When I said it in a hello, he laughed, surprised, and kissed my temple like I'd handed him a tool he'd needed all day. We told people. Over pancakes. At my parents' house, my mother listened and then kissed our cheeks and said, "I already set an extra place." My father, fork midair, grinned. "I always thought he was your best friend." Takes courage to graduate the definition. Jake's mom cried in the doorframe, then ushered me in with extra vigor, as if she could mother love me into knowing I belonged. His dad, arm in a sling, said, "We liked you before, we like you now. Wear good shoes and don't skip breakfast." The crew at Jake's job site surprised me with how unfazed they were. When he told them, looking like a man who had decided to stand in his own light, one of the guys nodded and said, "Cool, so Sam's in charge of snack rotation now?" Another added, "As long as your cuts stay straight, boss, love who you love." There's a decency in people that the loudest voices often drown out. When you make room for it, it shows up. But not everyone was ready. There was an old friend from high school who wanted to make it about a joke. There was a cousin who asked too many questions like he was trying to write our story for us. On those days, we practiced what Dr. Raines taught us. You do not need to shrink your joy to fit someone else's frame. We said, "We're happy," and let that be sufficient. At night, we built ordinary rituals. Tuesday dinners where he made tacos and I made sure there was enough cilantro. Saturday mornings where the hardware store staff learned my name and the bakery across the street learned his coffee order, 1 cream, no sugar, hot even in July. We took a weekend and drove to the Cape in the off-season when the beach is a piece of paper you can write your thoughts on with a stick. We stayed in a cottage that promised more charm than square footage. We held hands in the parking lot not to prove anything but because it felt right. And when we fought, because love is not a magic exemption from human, we tried to fight in ways that left the room standing. He told me once, frustrated, "I feel like you go into doctor mode whenever we disagree." I took that seriously. I learned to step down from expert and back into person. I told him once, "When you withdraw, I feel 12 again, waiting for a call that doesn't come." He took that seriously. He learned to say, "I need a minute," and then to actually come back after the minute. We went to Pride that June. I'd always been ambivalent about crowds, but the sight of elders waving rainbow fans, teenagers with paint on their cheeks, families hand in hand, made something holy in me sit down and breathe. Jake stood a little taller. We ate ice cream. That melted faster than we could keep up with it, and when a marching band came through, he bounced in place like a kid. It's like the world decided not to pretend, he said. I squeezed his hand and said, welcome. If you ask a doctor what health means, you'll get a lecture on blood pressure and cholesterol and mental wellness. If you ask a carpenter what a home is, he'll talk about roofs and insulations and the way sound travels through drywall. Ask someone who loves someone else, and the answer is a collage. We built a porch swing together, the kind that makes neighbors wave. He measured and cut. I sanded until the wood felt like the inside of a story you love. When we hung it, the chains sang a little, and we both cheered like we'd been chosen. We sat on it that evening, the sky making overtime and the city yawning, itself toward bed. He rested his head on my shoulder. I thought of Mrs. Alvarez's hands and hoped my life would be kind to mine. Our conversations grew braver. He told me about the first time in high school he realized I might not be like the other boys, and how his impulse then had been protective. He told me about the girl freshman year of college who broke his heart, and how he had kept it together by building a bookshelf at midnight with no plan. I told him about the first man I loved and the way it had ended, quiet and decent, because being good to each other sometimes means staying apart. He nodded and didn't flinch. He started using words like bye sometimes, trying them on the way you try on a jacket and check yourself in a window that doesn't belong to you, not as a performance, as a gentle naming. Sometimes he just said, "I'm Jake," in a tone that suggested that was plenty. It was. We fell into a circle of friends, my colleagues who liked board games, his crew who liked poker, neighbors who liked their dogs so much they had parties for their birthdays. We played Scrabble and learned that he is quietly vicious at two-letter words. We hiked near the Blue Hills, where he pretended not to get winded and then pretended to be impressed by my stamina. We sat with my neighbor, Mr. Whitman, when his wife passed and helped him sort her books into piles that made emotional sense. Love isn't just the thing itself. It's the way it turns you toward other people and helps you carry their boxes. The first time we took care of each other when one of us was sick felt like a milestone I didn't know to name. I caught a winter virus that made my bones beg for a truce. He made soup and kept me hydrated and turned down the lights and put on old movies. He kissed my forehead and said, "You're terrible at being sick." And I said, "I prefer to supervise my own suffering." And he laughed, and I got better with both science and the placebo effect of being adored. His turn came in spring. He strained his back lifting something that should have been a two-person job. He didn't tell me until the second day because old habits are stubborn. When I found out, I drove to his place with the ice packs and the good anti-inflammatories, and my sternest reasonable voice. I set up his couch so it didn't argue with him. I read out loud to him from the kind of book that isn't fancy but is comforting. He watched me like I was a good map. The next day, instead of bringing flowers, I brought a grabber tool so he didn't have to bend to pick up his keys. He posted a photo of it with the caption, "Acts of service slaps." Sometimes we still got it wrong. I once scheduled us into a social weekend like I was trying to erase our introversion with activities. He once assumed I didn't want to come to a job site barbecue because he'd seen me flinch around loud men before. We told each other. We adjusted. The swing on the porch learned our weights and didn't complain. We learned our weights and tried not to, too. We'd been us for a year and then a little. Time is both tall and small when you are busy being alive. One evening in late summer, we drove to the Navy Yard again. It felt like a circle finding its own shape. The water was a dark mirror. The warship looked like it had something to say. We walked to our bench, the one we had half slept on that night with the exit sign, sat, and let the hum of the world surround us. He put his hand on my knee, anchored. "My dad asks about you. Like you're a weather pattern," he said, grinning. "He wants to know if you'll come over and watch the game Sunday." "I will," I said. He took a breath, then another, then cleared his throat like there was an audience and he wanted to be clear. "I don't know if I'll ever be the guy who puts every feeling into the perfect sentence on the first try," he began. "I do know this. When I'm with you, the world feels truer. The way I was taught to be a man, quiet, contained, useful, didn't include this. But I want it. I want you. Not as a special case. As my life. He pulled something from his pocket, not a velvet box, just a small blue pouch that looked like it had come from a hardware store because it had. Inside was a ring made from a nail, gently bent and polished into a circle. It was lovely and simple and exactly wrong for me and exactly perfect for us. "I don't have a speech," he said, voice wobbling slightly. "I have this and my hands and my heart. Will you be with me in the ways that matter? Will you build this with me?" I laughed and then I cried because the body is embarrassingly honest sometimes. I thought of Mr. Alvarez saying that boats that survive storms know something. I thought of my father telling me that courage is most often a slow decision. I thought of the first porch board we replaced, the way new wood learns to hug old nails. I thought of my house remembering it was a home because someone stood on it and said, "I'm not going anywhere." "Yes," I said. "Yes." It came out like a diagnosis and a prayer and a cheer. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit, and if it hadn't, I knew he would have found a way to make it. That's the thing about people like him. They stay until it works. We kissed. The lights of the city didn't wink knowingly. They just glowed like they always do. A ferry honked as if to say, "Get on with it!" And two teenagers on scooters zipped by and cheered like we were strangers in a story they'd tell later. We went home and sat on the porch swing and watched the street. The neighbors didn't know what had shifted inside our house, but I think they felt it. We did the mundane tasks of joy, texted parents and friends, changed our social media statuses with the kind of irony that made both of us roll our eyes. We went to sleep, two men in a small bed that felt suddenly exactly big enough. If you've stayed with me this long, you might be watching on a small screen in your kitchen or listening with your hands in dishwater. You might be young or older, or old like a tree that has weathered everything and still wants to learn a new season. You might be someone who loves someone who surprised you, or you might be the someone who surprised yourself. Here's what I want you to take with you, spoken in the tone I use with my patients when I care about them, which is always, it's okay to be surprised by your own heart. It doesn't mean your past was a lie. It means you are alive. You don't have to explain your joy to people who don't intend to understand it. Save your breath for the ones who do. Slow can be holy. Not every love has to erupt. Some loves lay a foundation, then build gentle and true. Ask for help. From a friend, a therapist, a nurse who pretends not to see you holding hands under an exit sign. Asking is not weakness. It's a vote of confidence in other humans. If you're the straight friend who finds yourself holding a hand you never expected to, know this. You're allowed to be kind to your past and step toward your future. You don't have to know everything to know what feels like home. I still go to work and tell people to walk around their block after dinner. I still make lists on sticky notes and put them on cabinets like tiny flags. Jake still buys too many screws, just in case, and I still squirrel away an extra bar of chocolate in the freezer for emergencies. We fight. We apologize. We forgive. We make plans. We throw out plans. We live. We're planning a wedding. That will probably involve good bread, bad dancing, and a ring exchange where our friends heckle us with tenderness. His crew already offered to build the arch. My colleagues offered to staff a hydration station because we are middle-aged now, and hydration is not a joke. Our parents are practicing their speeches out loud to their houseplants. The porch swing gets more visitors than it ever has. I never expected this from my straight friend. Maybe I should have expected it from the person who has always shown up for me. Maybe the surprise is not that he could love me, but that I could let myself be loved. Either way, I'm grateful. Grateful like an organ that's been waiting for the right rhythm. Tonight, if you're listening alone, know that you aren't. Someone is out there, driving through the rain with hot chocolate because you might be cold. Someone is learning to ask you, "Can I hold your hand?" And if you're the one who needs to ask, practice out loud. It helps. The words feel less like strangers when you finally meet. I'm a doctor, yes, and I'm a man who fell in love in a way that surprised the map. Both truths fit in my chest. The heart is an honest organ. Listen to it. It will murmur what you need to know.